Clear. A loss that remains unclear and thus has no closure. It's a loss that there's no official verification. It can't be clarified, it cannot be cured or fixed. It's a loss that can be physical or psychological, and we're going to talk about that some more too when we drill down and filter a little bit more. But there's an incongruence between the absence and the presence. The pathology lies in the external context of ambiguity, not in the individual or family. And what that means is that we tend, and I say we professionals tend, and it bleeds over into family members who pick up on this. We tend, because of where we've learned or where we've come from or the research, to pathologize grief. And when that happens, the family member integrates that and they see it as a fault of their own, a deficiency, as opposed to this, what's happening is a result of the external situation. The grief is, this, if it's a complicated grief, it's not the complication is not caused by oneself. It is caused by the ambiguous situation that they're in. I don't know if you've ever read the book The Glass Castle from Jeanette Walls, but this is a quote from her. And Jeanette Walls is she was like a newscaster or a TV personality who came from a very unusual childhood, and her childhood was her parents were they were beyond eccentric. Her mother was mentally ill, and she would see her mother on the street. I mean, she'd be in the back of a limo and see her mother, who was homeless and would not refuse to be helped by living someplace or by being settled into someplace safe. And what she says is, this is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do, my dear, is to grieve the loss of someone who is still alive. And this really incorporates too persons who are living with dementia. They are still alive, but there are many losses within them. So just some more, I've got to check this, just some more, a little bit more definition here based on Dr. Pauline's work. And it's an unclear loss. There is no closure, there's no resolution. When somebody has dementia, things are not going to improve. When we are having grief about this, if we try to work towards closure, Dr. Pauline Boss tells us that it is the working towards closure that is the stressor in this situation. And it can be used in many different contexts and population. When we look at psychological and the psychological and the physical aspects, the term ambiguous loss can be used in many different ways. It is chronic. It's the complicity. It creates symptoms that are misconstrued as medical disorders. Depression is a medical disorder. She makes it clear to us that what person's feeling is sadness. It's not a prolonged grief disorder that we try to put into a DSM-5. So it's due to the unknown time. The family doesn't know how long this is going to be. It's going to be, when it's going to end. It's a long goodbye. It's a slow incremental death. It's a relational disruption because it disrupts the relationship and the history of the relationship. And again, it can be mistaken for a medical disorder like depression. Whoops. These are just some terms here in the yellow about how else. These are some synonyms with ambiguous. So people will say, well, yes, and there are people who are caregivers for people who don't have dementia. Maybe they have a physical problem or some other chronic long-term problem, but it's not the same, because when somebody has dementia, they have, it's not just the physical disabilities a person is working with. They require more supervision. They're not able to express gratitude for the help they receive. And they are more likely to become depressed. And all of these factors are linked to more negative caregiver outcomes. The factors linked to physical health include the caregiver's behavior problem, the recipient's behavior problems, the cognitive impact, and the functional disabilities. These all lead into additional things that the caregiver, I say caregiver, care partner, I use that interchangeably. I'm trying to use care partner more. But there's a constant need to have a person watch the person with the Alzheimer's disease. They can't be left alone. They might have a self-harm. And there's a feeling of distress and depression associated with the caregiving. And what's helpful is I try to remind the care partner it's not the same. And I show them this is a picture of the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's disease. When you see the huge gaps and what they're missing, it can help them understand, like, yes, this is why this behavior is so bizarre. And this is why I'm having to respond to such a bizarre, unusual universe. And it's helpful for them to see the actual physical damage that is done to a brain that shrinks to a third of its normal size. And some of the behavioral changes of a person who has dementia, they're more likely to be more agitated, they're restless, they're aggressive. They may have aggression, because I don't want to stigmatize or put everybody into the same sort of silo behavior, but it's true, it's possible they could have verbal or physical outbursts. And then there is the wandering that the care partner has to be aware of, and the asking repetitive questions and the repetitive behaviors. And there's a element often of disinhibition. So no, it's not the same. This is a very different experience. I'll tell you what some of the clients tell me. Clients who I see in the office and group members, they will say, I feel like she's already gone. And they will all say, I am tired of people saying, well, at least she's still here with you, because they themselves may feel like they are not there with them. This is a different person. They feel guilty. Overwhelmingly, the feeling that they acknowledge, that they report, is guilty. I feel guilty because I wish it was over, and I know I'm going to regret it. When I do see people in the office, and this happened just recently because it was a very short time span, I saw somebody who was overwhelmed and exhausted of being a caregiver. And she was becoming angry and resentful, but also feeling guilty because she wanted this to be over. And she knew that as soon as it was over, that she was going to have extreme regret. And sure enough, it was, very short sessions. And her mother died unexpectedly. So it was, you could see this coming. And I could see, like, this is going to be a huge regret because she wasn't able to work on this before the mother died. And many relationships are not good. When people will say, my mother was never a good mom to me, and yet now they are here in the situation where they're having to take care of their mother. This kind of conflictual, their feelings of this was never what I intended, and feeling angry about it and resentful. I told my dad that my husband needed me because of surgery, and he didn't care. The characteristic of a person who needs care not being able to show any empathy or sympathy of any kind, it's very hard for a caregiver who is really stretched thin. And then a widow told me, I miss having my husband to be there and to take care of me. Very common reaction that their husband is there physically, but they can no longer ask them to help with understanding what this bill is, turning off the water in the back or anything like that. And then finally, the most drastic is that I don't know how much longer I can do this. This is, what somebody tells me when they are absolutely exhausted and are feeling like they're not doing a good job. So here I want to talk about what Pauline Boss makes into two different descriptions. And type 1 is like the physical absence. And her work was really based on, and it started off with the physical absence of somebody, but yet there was still a psychological presence. And her work was first based on her work with soldiers and during the war. And here the person is leaving, but there's not a goodbye. So they might be, for example, they might be missing. They might be a missing person because of a natural disaster. They might be missing because there's a murder. They are no longer there because they are in prison. There's been a suicide, or maybe there's been a divorce, so they're no longer physically present, but their psychological presence is still there to this person. And then the one that we're mostly associated with is the type 2. There is a psychological absence, but there's a physical presence. The person is there. They're walking around. Their body is still there. They're doing things. They might even be talking to us. But the psychological presence that used to be there is changed. And this is common in persons who have dementia, Parkinson's disease, a brain injury. But when I told you earlier that there are people that also fit into this. For example, if there is a hoarding disorder, the person is there, but the way they were and the relationship that they used to have with the care partner, because of the hoarding disorder or because of perhaps autism or an addiction, they're there. But the psychological absence of relationship, because it's the rupture in the relationship, has happened now. And so now there's a goodbye, but the person hasn't left really. They're still physically there. So so she's done, I want to talk to, and because I do a lot of talk about estrangement, and estrangement is often also a very ambiguous loss for the parent. They might lose their adult child who is there, but they don't have the relationship anymore. So some of the factors that a person with dementia might, that come up with someone with dementia is there is, for the caregivers, is that there is an ambiguity, okay? This is a very strange and unusual situation. There is an ambivalence. And when I say ambivalence, what I mean is that for some people, they didn't get asked if they wanted to be the caregiver. So they are put in this situation and they're not sure. They didn't ask for this. Maybe it just presented to itself. This happens to the last child, the youngest child who just happens to be in the home. Some people have told me that they happen to be have their family members come maybe for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and when they recognized what was happening, the parent never went home. And so this shift to becoming their care partner happens very quickly. And it is something that they were not prepared for and not something that they necessarily wanted. So it's a common feeling, and it's a very normal feeling. So we work with them to not feel guilty, but it's very hard for them to accept this and resent the caregiving role, because now they're in dual roles. We're going to talk about that. They are the daughter and the caregiver, or maybe they're the wife and the caregiver, and they have trouble being able to synthesize these. They only can see things in maybe an extreme or in a black and white. And it's hard for them to see that this needs to be, that it's a both and. And then there are situations with past relationship history. Something that we talked about is that, a lot of adult children may not have felt, maybe they don't feel like they had a good childhood. Maybe they feel like their parents didn't do a good job. And now they have to get through that while also dealing with the fact that they are the caregivers in this situation. And then, of course, one of the, and this happens a lot with FTD, frontotemporal dementia, is that there's a lack of empathy. So the caregiver, they're having all of these things, and they are busy running around, setting up doctor's appointments, buying groceries and figuring out caregiving. And the person they're doing all this for is not showing any gratitude, any understanding. And not that they're doing it just for that, but it's an additional stressor, it's an additional hurt on their part that it doesn't recognize. And so, in terms of ambiguity, the care partner will say, is this still my mom? The ambivalence, do I have a choice in being a caregiver? And sometimes, because of the cost, because of the location, because maybe there are no other siblings or family members that can do this, they feel like, I don't have a choice. So I'm kind of ambivalent. I didn't ask for this relationship of being a caregiver. And the unpredictability with dementia, the person doesn't know, how bad is this going to get? In the group sessions, it's helpful because people do have some preparation, but it can be scary to them too if they don't feel like they're getting enough tools, because if they hear only the negative of, oh my gosh, this is going to get very bad? Or is this, I don't, how can I prepare for this? This is a very unpredictable disease. And how long is this going to go on? For people who can say, well, I guess I'll take off work or I'll take a leave of absence for a year, that may not be enough. Is this, people say, well, my gosh, I've come to this group and I'm hearing from people who are at 5 years still being a caregiver, and that's frightening to them. And so what we recognize is how to help them have some resilience, which we'll talk about shortly. And again, the dual roles. I am the daughter and the caregiver. And we can just say that, but when you're doing very intimate caregiving activities, maybe toileting, helping wash, your mother or your father if you're a daughter, these are very, can be very upsetting. And honestly, these are the kind of tasks that if somebody's not prepared to do it and they don't have another caregiver or can't afford somebody to do this, these are the things that can often, if they're not able to separate themselves in that moment to do this, these are things that do lead to the person being placed in a long-term care. And again, past relationship, she was never a loving mother to me. And yet I'm very resentful of being put in this position. And then again, I told my dad my husband was diagnosed with cancer. He didn't care. He wanted to know what was for dinner. So what a person with ambiguous grief may demonstrate, well, there's lots of frustration, huge frustration caused by the lack of resolution. They don't know how long, they don't know how bad this is going to be. There's a frustration and anger caused by the expectation to move forward. They are, if their peers are not in the same situation, maybe, and we have, and some of the groups is younger persons who are not expecting that this would happen to their parent at a young age. Maybe the parent is 60, 62, and they might share this information, but the rest of their community, society, doesn't have the capability to keep maintaining this empathy or understanding because life goes on. And so they feel like they're being shoved to move forward. Their grief, their losses are being disenfranchised. They're not being acknowledged. And this is one of the major things with ambiguous losses. It is a disenfranchised loss. People don't understand it. And so they don't reach out. When you have a loss, you lose your husband, your mother, and they die, people come to you. They bring you of course, the casserole. They bring you dinner. You're brought into this warm circle. People check on you regularly. But even that has its end, And when it's a loss or they're having a grief because of the person caring for is dementia, that goes a lot quicker. They have frustration about not being able to make plans or decisions. People say, oh, well, if you're in a group where your age group is they're going out, they're doing things, or they're, can I take this job promotion? They can't make any plans or decisions. They're not having rituals or community supports, maybe because they're concerned about how their loved one's going to act. So now they may not have a birthday party for their loved one, or their loved one may not be invited to a birthday party. They may not be invited to a wedding. So if they're not going, the caregiver may not be able to go either. It's another loss. They're feeling disenfranchised of their grief. We talked about that. And then finally comes the point where they feel immobilized. And this is the grief paralysis that Pauline Boss talks about. And the worst part is that they get the message that society is seeing them in this way, this very cruel way of, you've entered the final stage of grief, milking it. And to that is something that they're constantly aware that they don't want to be seen or perceived in this way. In many of the groups, I'm doing now 4 groups a week, so I often refer to it because those are the experts. And in many of the groups, somebody will, be waiting all week to share what's happened, one of these losses and they're so conscious of talking about it to others that even with their peers who are experiencing this, they feel like they shouldn't be taking up any more time in the group. Of course, the group will say, and I'm making up a name, Sarah, this is your time. It's perfect. Okay, this is what this group is for. But in their mind, they feel like they're not allowed to, or they don't, they don't deserve to spend this group time when the group is for this, even because they don't want to be perceived in this way. So as caregivers, those of you who are here, that you have a loss of your dreams. You might have a loss of a confidant, a partner. You're no longer sharing roles. It's all on you. All the responsibilities are on you. The progressive losses of the life of the person with dementia, the more they lose, you lose that too, because their independence in any of that means that now you are taking that on as well. So here are some of the things that people are saying is they've seen the loss of a loved one as they were. So now they're not that way. So that relationship, that attachment, it's a relational rupture. Pauline Boss refers to that often. There's a loss of control of their life now. So people, when that happens, they live on the edge. They're in limbo. And Pauline's refers to this as a frozen grief. They can't move on beyond this. They're stuck right here. They have a loss of trust in the world. It's not fair. Everybody's life goes on, and I'm stuck here. And they will say, my sister's life goes on. She's having a great time. She lives far away, so she doesn't have to deal with this. This is very unfair. I'm here taking care, and my sister, my brother, all my cousins, their parents are doing fine, but my world is different now. So I'm not going to be able to trust, what people are doing in their lives. It's going to be completely different for me. My dreams are changing. I may not be able to apply for a promotion that might call for a change in where I work, my work hours. And for people who are married, they might say, I have a loss of identity. Am I still married? I'm now having to clean and groom my husband. I'm having to help toilet him. This is not what I thought this is not what I thought I would be doing. This is not what my relationship was like for him. And we can say very easily, well, in our marriage vows, for sickness or in health, till death do us part. Until you are getting up every 3 hours to help somebody, that sounds very simplistic, and it's extreme and black and white thinking that a lot of caregivers were brought up with. So it has even more difficulty for them to deal with this. So our goal here for professionals' goal, but this is a talk for you, the caregivers. Our goal is to build resilience, and this is resilience based on the definition of Pauline Boss. It's the process and outcome of successful adaptation to a difficult or challenging life experience, okay? Especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. This is about, because this is a term that we now use for everything. And my difficulty with this term is that we often use this term because there's such a lack of community support. And because I work with older adults, we'll say, we're trying to build their resilience. And I'll often see this as we need to help them be resilient. There's a whole nother part of that. And that whole nother part is that we shouldn't be depending just totally on their resilience. We should be building a community and society that is there for older adults and that is there for people who are dealing with these kind of losses. So I have trouble with this term being thrown around, but truly there is a place for it, and trying to help somebody get to a place of, so that they can make it through this period. Some of the predominant factors that contribute to resilience are the way people view and engage the world. Yes, that's true. If we can help them view the world a different way, it might make them be able to deal with some of the losses and the pain. The availability and quality of social resources. This is very important. How available that is, how people will use them. Encouraging the care partner to use the resources, and then of course using specific coping strategies. And research has shown that resources and skills associated with more positive application It can be cultivated and practiced because we often also associate resilience with somebody who was just born that way. We'll say, that's the greatest generation. They lived through this. They're very resilient. But people who are not that way, maybe they weren't born that way. Maybe they're not a part of the greatest generation. We have to help them learn some of these skills. So these are the 6 tasks that Pauline Boss uses to, and I want to point out, just like we always did with, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she had all the stages of grief, and it was never meant to be the way it was taken. It is not linear, and neither are these tasks linear. Finding meaning is certainly one of the predominant, main, probably first ones, but we move in throughout all of these. We might find meaning at the same time we're discovering new hope. We might find tempering mastery. We might be trying to normalize our ambivalence. But all of these don't happen and don't have to happen in this order. Let's go ahead and just start with, what about finding meaning? A person who is dedicating themselves to being a care partner, and when I say this, I am not minimizing that some people are not being the 24-hour care partner. You don't have to be 24/7 hands-on to be a caregiver. We know that now. The stresses, there are still stresses. There are still, very heavy interactions and responsibilities that somebody who is not the main caregiver, and so be very aware of that. So people will say, well, I'll come into this group and I'm hearing people talk, but my situation is different. And then they'll say, I feel bad because I do have caregivers, paid caregivers that come, or I feel bad because I'm a remote caregiver. That remote caregiver is probably still also constantly worrying. I am not a caregiver, but I tell my brother, who is very involved with my parents, I say, I wake up every morning worried about my parents. Every morning, they're in their 90s. Every morning I wake up and, oh my gosh, because I'm worried about this. So you don't have to be the hands-on 24/7 to have this affect you. And some people, it does stop them. You might be remote, but you might be totally calling every day. But for the people who are having trouble finding meaning, if they're there 24/7, they will say, how can I find meaning with my loved one is in the last stages of dementia? And this has been going on for a long time. What is my life, if anything, but this? And so it's trying to help them make sense of an event or a situation that just doesn't have logic. There is no coherence. It's irrational reasoning. So it's trying to help them make sense of something that is irrational. And that doesn't mean that your life is not important right now. It means that we still want you to find a way to have meaning in your life. And for some people, their meaning might be, my meaning in my life is taking care of my loved one until they leave. That's okay. If that's their meaning. My meaning in life might be fighting the legislature to have funding for research or services for this disease. And they might say, I'm very busy, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a letter, send an email, or make a phone call to my legislator every day until I know that they are, pushing for services for this. So what helps is really helping them make sense of what you can't make sense of. And that's helping them recognize, I'm making up a name here, Sarah, you're having this trouble because this is a very ambiguous disease. So your finding meaning is going, you are not going to be able to find meaning in the same way that you did before. But we want to help you find meaning to what's during these days. What are you going to be doing today or tomorrow that is important to you, that recognizes that you are important? And whatever that is, it might be taking care of a loved one. It might be advocating. It might be still finding a way to make contact with your adult son. so that your life is still important. And one of the things that is that helps with that, let me just go to that, is dialectical thinking, and that's holding the opposing ideas of absence and presence. You know, we try to teach people to stay away from an either or, an extreme of this or that, because really finding meaning, the best way to do that is to recognize you are both. For example, I can either take care of the person with dementia or myself. Try doing both and. I can take care of both myself and the person with dementia. Okay, it's not one or the other. I'm either the person with dementia's daughter or their caregiver. Both thinking means I am both the person with dementia's daughter and I am their caregiver. I am still their daughter. I still have feelings, about them that, maybe they're positive or negative, or I see myself as their daughter, but also still their caregiver. I either love the person with dementia exactly as they are now, or I miss how they used to be. You do both. You love the person with dementia exactly as they are now, and you still miss how they used to be. It is not one or the other. And both thinking, and Pauline Boss uses this in many different ways. You can see some of the examples here in the lower. For example, dealing with a person who has a missing loved one, or dealing with a child who has autism. My child is both present in my life and sometimes feels absent due to their unique way of connecting. Caring for a patient, my parent is both here with me physically and fully present mentally, and not fully present mentally due to their condition. I love my mother, but I also feel exhausted as her caregiver. I miss my dad, but I still cherish the moments that we have right now. I feel relief and sadness when I feel both relief, and I also have sadness when I take a break from caregiving. One of the things that we work for in helping people find meaning is, these are just some simplistic things. We want people to address it, name it, identify it. So we want people to identify the losses. What exactly, let me see, I may have missed that. Oops, sorry. So what exactly is the loss? Is it the loss of my husband as being a romantic partner? Because you have to, we say you have to name it to tame it. And we want people to look at we encourage you, if you're a care partner, look at some of the ambiguous losses that you've had in your history as a care partner. And it's helpful to honor each loss individually. Each loss individually is important. I might be a care partner to my husband, and the loss I have now as part of a couple is an important loss to me. And if I don't take it and name it and I honor it, I get close to the point of that loss being disenfranchised. And when people in the community, they may not recognize that, I have to do that. I have to recognize it and I honor it. And it's helpful, maybe your community is not able to see that. It's helpful to seek community. And a lot of times people in the community can't understand this. But what community is, it might be other women or men in the same situation. We see that in groups. Fortunately, we are seeing more and more groups available to the community. You might need to see the right professional, and the professional that you want to see is somebody who is not helping you get to the point of closure, to help you have closure, because we know that closure is the stress that makes all of this more difficult. The more you seek closure, the more this ambiguous loss is going to be further and further from you. And it's the point of living through this and living and seeing all these 6 tasks through that is going to be more helpful to you. And of course, journaling, and we all use journaling in our practice. If you are a social worker here, we say that. And people say, oh yeah, I had a therapist and she wanted me to journal. And I think the problem is they didn't tell them why they wanted them to journal. The reason to journal is it will help you recognize as you're writing something out, like, oh yeah, I didn't get to go to the dance party because my husband was not able to, because he has severe, a protracted illness. And when you see it, that helps you identify it. This is an additional loss that I had not identified. this is one of the losses that I see. No, this is important to me. This was a part of my life. So we want you to identify it and honor each loss, each one individually. So real quick, let me just do a case example. Now, and this is a very common case example. Oops, sorry, I want to go back. I meant to go back here. We want people to temper mastery. I'm aware of the time, so I want to be really clear. When we say temper mastery, is it Americans specifically? We have a really rough time of not doing something exactly right. So we have to adjust our expectations of that. And caregivers, we want to give the very best care. And you know, okay is not good enough. And so we have to acknowledge that in order to preserve ourselves and to work towards resilience, to live through this, we don't have to do a perfect job. And I see this in caregivers when they don't want to call a sister to take care of a parent. They'll say, and I'll say, well, is your sister involved? Do you think she could sit with your parent while you go to this function? And the person will say, oh, my sister is not going to feed my parent. They're going to give them a sandwich, you know, and a sandwich isn't, to me, is a meal and it is still nurturing. But if you are going to have your level of mastery that it is a hot meal every single time, you know, with everything as, you know, in the perfect food pyramid, that's going to slow you down. This will hinder you. We are going to need to reconstruct our identity. We might feel like this, you know, this place that we are now, we need to reconstruct that this is okay for me to be doing this and this. And if you're a family member taking care of a loved one, a parent, and there is no other buddy coming to help you, your identity and your family, what you see as your family changes. And people will say, and unfortunately I do see this, people say, I do not consider my family anymore. So my identity has changed. We want to normalize ambivalence. And when we said ambivalence, remember we said that people will say, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to be a caregiver. And one of the things that is most difficult to say out loud, and people can only say this in a very special, sacred place, is they will say, I think my parent would be better off if they weren't here. Or I feel like they'd be better once they're dead. And that is a really hard thing for somebody to feel and to say. What we want to say is that people do feel this way. And it doesn't mean that you didn't love. Remember, it's both and. I love my parent. I want the best for them. And yet I'm feeling like they might be better off if they weren't here. Not everybody feels this way, but for the person that feels this way, we want them to be able to say that if that's what they need to be able to get to this place of having some resilience, that this is you're not a bad person for feeling this way. They do this best in a support group that's trusted, that has history with them and that they know. And honestly, support groups like that, it's hard to find one if you're meeting erratically, not on a regular basis. That's why I tell people, when I do a support group, I do it weekly. And people say, well, I can't make it every week. Well, this is how you build trust. And this is how you make this your own sacred place for yourself as well. The person needs to revise attachment. We feel this loss because we are so attached. The more attached we are, the bigger the loss is for us. So we have to revise how we feel about attachment. And sometimes attachment may also feel that, we didn't have this sense of community. So my loss is that I don't have hopes of now having that attachment. So also the opposite way. We have to discover new hope. And for some people, that means that my life now is having a life without my loved one. It means I might have to have a caregiver here. That's easily said than done. Number one, there's a lack of caregivers. We know that. And honestly, it costs a lot of money. And people will say, listen, I don't want one more person to tell me I need to take care of myself or you need to do some self-care. That is what we want. That is easily said until that person is paying $25, $27 an hour on a limited budget. So these are things where society, our community, does let people down. That's a gap we have. But when possible, we want them to see a new hope. And we might say, tell me what you want, and I'll ask you, tell me what you would like to see if, in your new life. If this, if you were not having this very heavy, caregiving, what would you like to see? What would you like to do? What would be new hope? And they might say, something I would look forward to is that I've not been able to set up my painting easel because I'm taking care. So that's a new hope for them. Or, I've been wanting to take a class online, and I've not been able to do that, but I look forward to that whenever I can. You guys, I'm going to check the chat real quick because I realize I haven't, it's hard for me to do both.
Haven't seen anything new come in yet, Gina. Some feedback. Lots of fans of the Glass Castle book
Yes.
as well. But I haven't seen anything new come in quite yet
Okay.
in the
All
chat.
right, good. Oops. Uh-oh. Now I don't know how to get out of my chat. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay. So helping them find a new hope. And those of you that are here, and this is something that you're struggling with, but I hope that if anything, that one of the things that you do is you recognize that of these steps, and of course, this is a very brief representation, but you have this available to you in the library. The Pauline Boss books are there, and the one that I really like the most is Loving Someone with Dementia. She has several books, and we'll talk about this at the very end here. But I hope that you at least go away with recognizing that one thing maybe, one thing I haven't done is I haven't looked at what do I want to do when this is over? What do I want to do? What new hope do I have? And why is my attachment, I haven't revised it. My situation with my family, she talks about the psychological family. Your psychological family is the family that you build. It may no longer be your aunts and uncles and your sisters or brothers, sadly, but you may have a new family. And I hope that, you can be aware, or I hope that you will let somebody help you be aware, even see a professional to help you adjust your mastery and recognize I'm having a lot of trouble adjusting this and tempering it down so it's realistic. So just real quick, let's now look at, this is a case history that is very common. And I'm not using the real names, of course, this is, this can be anybody. Gary is 75. He's married to Cecile, who's 74. They've been married for 30 years, but it's a second marriage for both of them. Cecile has two daughters from her first marriage. Together, they do have two children, a son and a daughter. Cecile is diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and she's had this diagnosis for the last 7 years. Cecile is now living in a memory care facility. Gary, who I watched him go through this, tried as long as he could to not have her placed anywhere, and he tried it as long as he could. I saw this whole process to keep her at home with him helping with additional help. So now Gary is living alone in a large family home, but he does see her almost every day. Tell me, and I think that you can put in the chat, tell me what you see are some of the ambiguous losses that Gary might be experiencing. If you would drop that in the chat. If you want to be unmuted, we can do that as well. So I've discussed Gary and Cecile. Am I missing something?
Nothing in yet.
Okay. So I can help you with this then. So let's talk then. You guys do know that this is a speaker's nightmare when nobody participates, but that's okay. So let's talk about what Gary experienced. That's a picture of Gary. I hope it's okay shown. No, I'm not kidding. I would never show a picture of Gary. He has a loss of a role as a husband. He loved being a husband to his wife. He liked taking care of her. He liked being the man of the house. He liked making sure she was protected. He no longer has that role. They were very engaging as a couple. They went out a lot. They had couple friends. They had many activities as a couple. He enjoyed going out as a couple and having couple friends. He has lost his role as a couple. His plan for retirement is just like, some people, of course, this would not be my plan. My husband had this plan. I called it a nightmare. We would get an RV, and I said, yeah, that's a nightmare. That's not a plan. But he had a plan with his wife to get an RV and travel around. His future plans, his retirement has completely changed. So, and then of course he's had a loss of intimacy, and he talked very openly about this. He misses his intimacy. It was a very hard loss for him. His wife is no longer there for him on an intimate level. I wanted to make you aware of this. This is a survey by, I forget the names, it's so hard. It's Maruski. This is a duo. This is a team from St. Louis, Missouri. This is the Merritt Mauser Caregiver Grief Inventory. And this is a 50-question version, but there is also a shorter version. But for the purpose of giving you a little bit more detail, I wanted to let you look at this as a tool. And this divides up the losses into 3. And these are, okay, they'll talk about, this helps people identify the losses in terms of a personal sacrifice. And these are some of the questions under personal sacrifice. For example, I miss so many of the activities we used to share. I feel I'm losing my freedom. The second category is the heartfelt sadness and longing. I long for what we had shared in the past. It hurts to put him in bed, to put him and her to bed and realize they're gone. And then the third category is that of worry and isolation. I'm worried, I'm very isolated. Dementia is a double loss. I've lost the closeness with my loved one and the connectedness with my family. And so they would grade these, they would score themselves either 1 to 5, 5 being the highest score. My family has no idea what I'm going through. And that, of course, that's an isolation. They might say if they're very isolated, they would level 5. So these are then added up, and it gives you how to score it. But then in the final, on the right-hand pane, it'll tell you kind of, where the person would be, what's the higher than average score. For example, if a person has a very high score and sense of personal sacrifice and burden, that's a good place to begin. Let's recognize this, and let's acknowledge it, and let's talk about each individual loss. If they're feeling a sadness and a longing, for example, this person might be average. And if there's a low level, the worry, maybe, for example, maybe the low is worry and they feel isolation. If there's a low score, they do recognize that the person might be in a form of denial, or they could be in a form of they're handling this okay. This, of course, is never meant to be just the total tool that you would use, but this is a good place to identify for yourself what are some thoughts or losses that you are having. So, before we close, I do want to tell you too that caregiving is often talked about in a very enduring way, and it's a very difficult place. And so, one also recognize that the clients also tell me this at the end. I feel like I did everything that I could. My sisters are going to have to live with knowing they weren't there, but I'm okay with what I did. I'm at peace with whatever comes next. I miss her every day, and I'm glad she's not suffering anymore. You can't see the not. This is the dialectical thinking, the both and thinking. I was ready, and they were ready. So real quick, I just wanted, and this is a very limited list, but I want to let you know about some resources here. I want to tell you that I often go to the Alzheimer's societies in the UK and Canada. They have some really great resources, and this is a very helpful book that I want to draw your attention to. And of course, there's a local organization, Duet and Health and Aging, and Pauline Boss is directly involved with them, and they have a 10-week group to work with this. I've given you the link to the flyer here. There's some great books. Ken Doka, I'm going to show you the slide here. He is well known. He has coined the term disenfranchised grief. And of course, Pauline Boss. And these are the 4 books. Honestly, they kind of blend together in my mind right now. First one was Ambiguous Loss when she first started writing. And the most recent one is The Myth of Closure, where a lot of this is related to the pandemic. Her husband died during the pandemic, but not of COVID. But it's interesting and it's moving, and that she discusses her husband as well. But the book that is very relatable to you all, The Loss, Trauma, and Resilience, of course, but this one is Loving Someone Who Has Dementia, and I highly recommend this. Ken Doka has written many books, but these are some of the most very good ones that I want to let you know about. Disenfranchised grief and living with grief before and after the death. These are just some things I'm involved in. If you ever are interested in meeting with me about any of these things, I do a lot of talks on dementia stigma, ageism, family estrangement, supervision. So you're welcome to talk to me about any of these. 3 minutes. I'm sorry, I always go over. Tell me if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Gina. That was an absolutely fantastic presentation. We do have one question in the chat that says, can you share where we can receive local support for anticipatory and ambiguous loss? Is a grief support group appropriate?
Some of the grief support books, the Retreat Center does have some different groups. And I think that the best way to do is Alzheimer's Services also, in the course of discussing their caregiving and getting support, much of the discussion of anticipatory loss and grief is discussed there. You do not have to be in a anticipatory grief and loss group, because in the groups that I do, they're about caregiving, but we discuss anticipatory loss and grief. Alzheimer's Services has many groups for that. The Retreat Center has many groups. I'm associated with the organization HFC, Hilarity for Charity, and they have many groups for that. And all the groups are online and they are weekly. So the groups I do are weekly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gina. And we do have some good feedback in the chat, so I'm going to save all that for you and I'll be able to send it to you. And I also will share the books that you shared as well, because I know there was a lot of interest in those too.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time. I think that's all the questions, and that is our full hour. So we appreciate you so much, Gina. Fantastic, fantastic job as
Thank you all.
usual.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your interest in this.
Thank you. Hope everybody has a good rest of their day.